Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Open to Export webinar about export controls and the exciting launch of a brand new, much needed export controls profession. My name is William Barnes-Graham, and I am the Senior Content Editor at the Institute of Export and International Trade. Next, please. Open to Export is a free online service helping small businesses get ready to sell overseas through our step-by-step articles and guides, regular webinars, our Export Action Plan tool, and our quarterly competitions. You can find out about all of these on our website at www.opentoexport.com. Open to Export is powered by the Institute of Export and International Trade, the UK's professional membership body for traders. Endorsed by the World Trade Organization and the International Chamber of Commerce as a small business champion, we offer a unique range of individual and business membership benefits, education and training catering for beginners through to master's degrees, and an always exciting and prestigious programme of events celebrating UK businesses' exporting achievements. We will be running a live Q&A later in the session, and you can ask questions at any point during the question box on the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. The general principle here is that we'll ask questions that are relevant to the broader audience, so we won't go into company specifics as such. But if you do have specific questions, we can refer you to our technical helpline afterwards. We have two fantastic speakers today, both of whom are vastly experienced export controls professionals who have been involved in the setting up of a new profession, which we are about to hear about. So it is my delight to hand over to Dr. Roger Arthey, formerly Head of Export Control at Rolls-Royce, and firstly to Claire Harrison, Head of Business Awareness at the Department for International Trade's Export Control Joint Unit.
Thank you for joining this webinar to hear more about the export control profession. If you're dialing in, we know that you will have a keen interest in export control issues, and that is why we're excited to be able to introduce a new profession to recognise your excellence and capability. But first, let us introduce ourselves.
Hello, my name is Roger Arthey. Those of you who know me, and I think there's a few on the call, will know that I'm feeling very odd talking to a computer rather than an audience in front of me, but hopefully we'll be able to communicate well using this method. I retired some 18 months ago from the position of Head of Export Controls at Rolls-Royce. Over the previous 10 years, we'd improved both the effectiveness and the cost efficiency of the company's export control compliance. During my time there, I was particularly interested and excited about recruiting people from a variety of backgrounds and developing them both individually and into a team of global export control professionals.
And I'm Claire Harrison. I head up the Business Awareness team in the Export Control Joint Unit. The Export Control Joint Unit administers the UK system of export controls and licensing for military and dual use items. ECJU was formed in 2016, bringing together operational and policy expertise from the Department for International Trade, FCO and Ministry of Defence under one roof. The unit is based at 3 Whitehall Place. The Business Awareness team provides a wide range of training courses for exporters of controlled items. We also undertake stakeholder engagement with industry contributing to UK trade exhibitions and seminars. The team also looks after the gov.uk export control content, incorporating licensing and compliance procedures. Next, please. Today, we'll be focusing on UK strategic export controls for goods, software and technology. But you will recognise that each country you trade with has its own regulations which apply to goods, software and technology from or passing through that country. ECJU licenses up to £50 million worth of exports every working day, enabling UK aerospace, defence, security and other high-tech businesses to succeed internationally. The UK's robust system of export controls promotes global security by ensuring a responsible trade in sensitive goods and services. Keeping up with regulations can be complex. As you'll be aware, there are a series of lists in relation to strategic export controls. For instance, the military list, the EU dual use list, the radioactive sources list, the EU human rights list, the torture goods list, to name some. The lists are maintained and agreed by international regimes, Wassenaar, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, the Australia's Group, and Missile Technology Control Regime. If you are exporting firearms, there are a number of permission forms you need to be aware of, as well as the need for an export licence. The export control regulations have developed over years in response to global security issues. In cases of global security risks, for instance, acts of war and terrorism, sanctions can be imposed by the United Nations, by the EU, or even by individual states. They are in relation to a specific country or state and can include arms embargoes, bans on exporting specific items, trade sanctions, which bring into control items which would not normally be controlled. Then there are economic sanctions and financial sanctions. Other controls include military and WMD end use, which again can bring dual use and ordinary commercial items into the sphere of control. Next, there are trade controls. That's brokering a deal in moving military controlled items and firearms between countries outside the UK. There are also brokering controls for items that have potential WMD end use. Oh yes, and then don't forget transshipment controls. And these are just the UK regulations. UK industry has to comply with all other countries' regulations too. And remember, of course, every country has its own licences. There is a lot of information available on the gov.uk export control pages, and ECJU runs a training programme for those in industry with responsibilities for export control compliance. Other training programmes are available. We recognise that keeping up to date with regulations, however, is a challenge which the profession will address, and we'll be talking this afternoon about how you can keep yourself on top of the actions you need to take. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with the range of licences available to export and trade in strategically controlled items, but as a reminder, I'll just outline some of the main licences and permissions required for military and dual-use controlled goods, software and technology. For open licences, always check whether you can use these licences before applying for a standard individual licence. There are over 50 available for both military and dual-use items, including the 6 EU General Export Authorisations. There are strict terms and conditions applying to these licences, which you have to comply with. Standard individual export licences are for specific items going to a named end user. They are valid for a period of up to 2 years and can be revoked if necessary. They require supporting documentation, including an end use certificate. 70% of these applications are targeted to be processed within 20 working days. Our performance at the moment is well over 80%. You may also be familiar with the open individual export licenses, specific items going to a number of named end users. There is a short business case for these, and once approved, the licenses are valid for up to 5 years. Again, you have to comply with the terms of the licence, and regular audits are undertaken by ECJ compliance officers for both these and the open general export licences. We talked earlier about trading in specific items. There are 2 licences available, the standard and open individual trade control licences. If trading or brokering items applies to you, you must have one of these. And that's military items I'm talking about there in particular. The UK relies on a process of rigorous checks before a licence is issued. These checks consider the nature of the exports, the destinations and end users. The UK government will suspend or revoke licences where there is a clear risk to do so, or if conditions overseas make it impossible or extremely difficult to apply the consolidated criteria. The MOD Form 680. You would need permission from the Ministry of Defence to release classified information to overseas governments and customers in relation to your goods, technology and software, if any of them are classified to the level of official sensitive or above. Access is on SPIRE. The permission required is the MOD Form 680. and MOD colleagues in ECJU can assist you further with this process. Please don't forget, we're only talking about strategic export controls here. There are other types of export controls for other goods. These licenses, however, are issued by different government departments. Next slide, please. This may seem an odd slide to show you at the start of the webinar. However, we want to demonstrate to you the importance of remaining in compliance with strategic export controls. Not only will your shipment be stopped at the border if you haven't got the right permissions, but you may be subject to financial penalties and in severe cases, custodial sentences. The financial penalties are dependent on the value of the shipment and can be up to 3 times the value of the shipment. In some cases, this can equate to several £1,000,000 sterling. And certainly the US penalties can be even greater. This will impact on your reputational risk and will result in adverse publicity. Next, please. So, compliance is all about ensuring a knowledge of export and trade control laws. As we've seen, it's not just UK regulations, it's international laws as well. You also need to know what good software technology traded by your company this applies to. You need to keep adequate records to maintain accountability, and you need to ensure the right licenses are in place to ensure you're exporting responsibly. So having looked at the range of regulations and licenses and permissions, it's easy to see the level of expertise you need to have in the company, whether you're a sole trader or a multinational. You may be making occasional exports. You may be a small company in a supply chain who usually supplies to a larger firm in the UK, and you may find yourself dealing with the end user based overseas. You may be responsible for procurement and shipping in your company, and export controls have just been added to your portfolio of expertise. You may be in a large company where your major role is handling compliance. Compliance is the same for any type of company. You have to do it, it's the law. So where do we go from here? Joining this profession will help you realise you're not on your own. You can learn more and make contacts with others who know more than you and who've been through it before. I'd just like to add in here a note about our duty as the regulator. For ECJU, it will be about the balance we have to draw between having accreditation to this standard, which even if endorsed by ECJU, can still mean that you or your company can be found in breach of export control regulations. Belonging to the profession will be a risk mitigation factor, but it's not a guarantee. But for now, I'm handing you to Roger, who can share his hands-on knowledge of the importance of compliance. Roger.
Thank you very much, Claire. We suspect that a lot of what Claire's just gone through is familiar to many of the people on the call, but we wanted to cover it because there may be people on the call for whom this is all new, and it's important for you to know the context in which we're setting up this export control profession. So thank you very much, Claire, for that explanation. So how does a company set about being compliant, developing its compliance and demonstrating its compliance? Well, if you'd like to go to the next slide, a really good method of doing so is to develop an internal compliance plan. It's not a requirement. Regulators don't require you to have a compliance plan, but it certainly helps. And as Claire has said, all of these things can help mitigate, in this case, in the situations of non-compliance. The ICP can be as large or as small as is necessary for the size and the activity of your company. If you're a small company, or if you're only handling a few strategic items, then the ICP can be very simple and straightforward. If you're a big multinational or a big company dealing with multinational goods or technology and software, then an ICP might need to be fairly complicated. The sorts of things that an ICP should contain, and once again it depends on the sorts of activities you're doing, are a commitment to compliance, demonstration that the company and the leadership of the company is committed to compliance with the export control regulations, an explanation of the structure and responsibility of people within the organisation for compliance. We use the word screening. It has a wide terminology, but making sure that you know exactly what the following, all that you need to know about the following. First of all, about the personnel you're dealing with, both the personnel within your company and the personnel in the organisations that you're dealing with. We talked about goods and technology and software. You need to understand your supply chain, consignees, end users and end use, and any suppliers to distributors. So having a good understanding of all that by screening those is important. As Claire has expanded on, obtaining and complying with licenses is critical, and to demonstrate compliance with the licenses, you need good shipment and transfer controls and very good record keeping that can be audited internally or externally if necessary. In order to ensure that everybody in your organisation is aware of their own responsibilities, you need communication and training. And it's good to undertake audits and reporting on those audits and looking for improvement measures. And finally, handling suspected violations. Having a policy outlined in your ICP of how you're going to do all of these things is very valuable, not just to you as the export control team, but also all the people in the organisation who refer to it. And this is something that the export control profession can help with. If you'd like to go to the next slide. We've talked about people in the organisation who are responsible for export control. Most organisations who are dealing with strategic goods and controlled technology require at least some access to a specialist knowledge. Larger organisations might employ a team. Smaller organisations might have 1 or 2 people who are focal points for that activity. Small companies might not have the resources to have their own person and might rely on consultants, either individuals or within an organisation. From my experience in Rolls-Royce, observing other companies, that whoever you've got looking after export control needs at least some of the following, and I think these are pretty obvious. First of all, they need knowledge of the regulations, so they need training initially, but as Claire has said, the regulations change quite a lot and quite fast and sometimes quite radically, so keeping up to date with that is very important. Another key issue is understanding how the regulations apply to your organisation, and equally you also need to know which bits of the regulations you can safely ignore. If you're not dealing with chemicals, then you don't have to worry too much about the chemical parts of the regulations, but clearly you have to be sure that you can put some things to one side. As I've indicated already in the introduction to the ICP, having the top cover, having the authority from your leadership, from the company leadership, organisation leadership, is pretty important in ensuring that you can act as an export control responsible person. You also need access to authoritative advice and guidance, and this is where the sorts of activities that the export control profession will do can help you, both in the networking, but also giving you access to help and advice, and seeing how other people have tackled the same sorts of questions that you're having to face. And of course, as I already said, things are constantly changing, updating, moving, and so keeping track of all these things as you go along is pretty important. Okay, next slide, please. Now, bit of a story. In my youth, I was a chartered engineer and a member of the Institute of Metals, being a metallurgist. And because of that, I appreciate the value that a professional association can bring in promoting standards and developing the skills of the personnel in their organisation. Skipping on a few years, when I was in export control, we talked many times about a professional association for export control, but many of you will understand that we're always too busy to do anything about it. Now, I retired about 18 months ago, and it's given me the opportunity to take a bit of initiative, and I've prodded a few people, and I have to say I'm very, very pleased with the responses I've had from all the people I've spoken to, from industry, from the associations, from academia, from regulators, and the Institute of Export Control, Institute of Export. So it has been a very exciting time over the last several months developing this profession. Talking briefly about the Institute of Export, the Institute of Export has a strong reputation for supporting British industry in making exports. As part of that, they have provided already advice on export control and training. So when we approached them about creating a special profession for export control personnel, they could immediately see the synergy. We've been working together to create this organisation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, the export control profession. Our vision is to enable and promote excellence in compliance with export and import control and trade sanctions regulations. And I want to underline the word excellence in that, because as I've already indicated as we've gone through, my view of excellence is not just effective compliance, which of course is the legal requirement, but also efficient, cost-efficient compliance, whereby you do it at a cost that isn't ridiculously large relative to the size of the company. So our mission is to promote that by representing the export control profession and providing members with the essential resources, professional points of contact and learning support that they need. And obviously part of what we've been doing over the last few months is to working out some of what those requirements are. If you'd like to go to the next slide. I thought it would be very useful to show the current export control profession board. I don't propose to go through all this individually, but I just wanted to show it to demonstrate the sort of people that we've got on the board and where they come from, what their experience is. We've got people from manufacturing industry, we've got people from the logistics industry, we've got academia, we've got trade bodies and the regulatory bodies, including especially ECJU. And then of course we've got the Institute of Export representatives as well. So it's a pretty powerful team, I think you'll agree, and I have to say that we work very well together. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits that you would get from membership of the export control profession? Well, like all professions, you would obtain professional recognition, and this indeed will be through designatory letters, which are awarded for rigorously accredited combination of experience and qualifications. And I'll show you those in a moment or two. You'll be able to get professional and career development through a combination of qualifications and continuous professional development options, CPD, and we'll talk about those more in a moment or two. You'll be able to obtain authoritative expert advice and guidance from a network of professionals, and I'll be talking about that in a moment or two as well. Keeping up to date with the latest developments in export controls and sanctions through a range of regular and occasional communications and publications, and to be able to connect with and share information with other export control professionals at local, regional, national and international forums. So there's a wide range of networking opportunities there as well. Next slide. Now, many people, not necessarily all, but many people will be in organisations where the organisation itself may be persuaded to pay your fees for joining a profession. So what are the benefits to the organisation for doing so? Well, in addition to having happy and fulfilled employees, they will also be assured of the qualifications and standards of their staff. They'll reduce the risks of non-compliance and associated costs and fines by looking at effective compliance. They will reduce the costs of compliance. They will also have access to authoritative expert advice, and another advantage, they'll have access to a pool of accredited export control specialists for employment through the Institute of Export's jobs board. In other words, they can advertise positions on the jobs board and know that they've got something like a captive audience of specialists looking at those jobs. Next slide, please. Okay, membership. There's actually 3 levels of membership. I only expect people to apply for either associate member if they've got 3 years more experience, 3 or more years experience in a relevant job, or a full member for those who've got 10 years or more relevant experience. For those people, they get the designatory letters AMIXCP or MIXCP. It's very difficult to say those. I'm afraid that's the best abbreviations that were available to us. And you can apply for those positions now. If you go onto the export control section of the Institute of Export's website, you'll find the application form and you can apply. The fees for associate members are £118 a year, 118, and for full membership it's £135 a year, which actually is very competitive compared to other professional associations. I mentioned there's a third one. The third one is for retired members. I'm not expecting anybody on this call to be interested in applying for that, but it is on the website if you go and have a look. Next slide, please. So, training and education is clearly a very, very important part of the offering of any professional association, and that's no different for us. We will be making access to accredited training accredited by the ECP and allocated CPD points provided by the Institute of Export and International Trade. We're also applying that to the training courses currently offered by the Export Control Joint Unit, and those also being offered by EGAD, which many of you will be familiar with. We're also looking at other external providers. As many of you will know, there are other external providers out there. We've started discussions with some of them about getting their courses accredited. The benefit to them is that they will, their courses will be advertised on the Export Control Profession website to a captive audience, and so people will become more aware of those courses and be able to join them. Also, because we'll be looking to maintain people's continuous professional development scores, people will be encouraged to go on those courses to keep their scores up. Next slide, please. Expert advice. The Institute of Export already offers help and advice to their members, and that includes expert advice on export control issues. What we're doing is we'll make that available to members of the export control profession, but of course they will be likely to be asking much more hard and penetrating questions, and the export control profession board will be providing experts who can help with those more advanced questions. And again, as soon as you're a member, that facility is available to you. There's more resources to come. I'm going to pass over to Claire now for those.
Thanks, Roger. That was a really good canter through all of that, really good. William, we'll be moving on to the next slide. Thank you, that's really helpful. Thanks very much. We've already talked about how many regulations there are, and there's a huge amount of resource available out there already. The aim of this profession really is to bring all of this stuff together so everybody can get the information in one place. It'd be like a one-stop shop. As we all know, the key resource for making UK licence applications is the Spire export licensing system. There's also a huge range of other resources available, and that will help you to determine whether you need the licences and what licences are actually required. Keeping up to date with the reasons behind controls and why the licences may be required for previously non-controlled exports is an essential part of compliance. I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, William, by saying the Export Control Profession website is already up and running. Is that okay to say that?
Yes, it is.
It is it? That's good. Thanks very much. Great. There is a website address for it. I'm sure we can get that sent on to you after this webinar. When you've got it, please take time to have a look at it. It's already been populated with key information on Spire. It's got links to the ECJU published notices to exporters. We've got links to the ECJU homepage, which I'd like to promote. And that brings together all the guidance on the requirements for control. It gives you access to published open licenses, and also tells you when you're going to need standard and open individual export and trade control licenses. But it's also got all the access to EGAD information and other information too. So please do take time to have a look at it. It's been very well put together. It's going to be regularly updated. It'll bring together all of the resources. And as I said before, it's going to be a bit of a one-stop shop. So when you want to find information, you can just go there. As the profession develops, you'll be able to access articles and blogs on the website too. And we hope that some of you who are out there will also be wanting to contribute to articles as well, to keep it live and to keep it active. We don't forget that export controls are also applicable to the academic community, and the profession will be reaching out to the facilities available via Project Alpha run by the King's College. So while we've focused on UK controls a lot today, the profession will also be a means of bringing together information and guidance on the US export controls, including regulations such as ITAR and EAR in the USA. And as we know, EGAD, the export group for aerospace, defence and dual use industries, has been leading a lot of this work, and you'll be able to get access to their newsletters to be able to open all this information. Should we move on to networking? Just put a few of the networking events up here that we're going to be expanding on. And I'm sure you will agree that you learn a lot at networking events. And wouldn't it be great if you knew what was out there and which were the ones that are actually useful for you to attend? Often you find out about networking events after they've happened because somebody comes back and tells you about them. But what we're doing with the profession is that your involvement with these networking events will be contributing to CPD points, and that will be counting towards your diploma and degree qualifications. I'm going to pick up on one of these, which is the Export Control Symposium. We started the symposium concept with the aim of bringing together government departments who all had a part to play in export controls and compliance, including the Ministry of Defence, the Foreign Office, the National Centre for Cyber Controls, and the Department for International Trade. And what we wanted to do was to enable exporters to meet the regulators and to meet all of these bodies to explain the regulations. Some of the departments have changed names over the years, but after 6 years, it's going strong. There are regular large audiences in London, and we've even started regional symposia. The profession itself will be officially launched at the annual London Export Control Symposium, this year being held on the 30th of May. If you're not able to get to the event, we will publish details about the key messages on the Export Control Profession website. There are a number of other specialised activities relating to export control, and the profession will help you to identify the benefits of attending these other events and establishing the assistance available from other organisations. We will publish other conferences such as those organised by other commercial organisations. So I'm coming on to the last slide here, William. It's all about the next steps. And what I have to say is that talking for the Export Control Joint Unit, from the regulator's point of view, we're very pleased with this industry-led initiative, which will further improve compliance and develop your professional capability. I hope you'll also be enthused to find out more about how this profession can be a bonus to you, your colleagues and your employees. If you are able to attend the launch of at the symposium on the 30th of May, we'll provide you with more information then. But if not, please log on to the new Export Control Profession website. We'll post progress about all the resources, the qualifications and everything else on there. But now we've talked quite a bit, so I think it's time to answer some of your questions.
Many thanks to Roger and Claire. What a fantastic new initiative for the industry, and we're delighted to be certainly working with you both and then the rest of the board on it. We're going to open the floor to a couple of questions. You can ask questions using the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We won't get to all of the questions today because it's a very new initiative, but any that we don't get to today, we will get to offline afterwards. The first question I'm going to put to Roger comes from Helen, who asks, if you cover vast areas of your business, how do you ensure the training or passing on of knowledge is relevant to all sections? Roger.
Wow, that's quite a wide question. Yes, it's a really good example of a question that I think the helpline would be able to help you with. But what I can perhaps do is to give a little bit of my experience to answer that in this format. What I would suggest is if you like, break your organisation down into its constituent units and evaluate each unit in its own merits, on its own merits. And I mean, depending on the size of the organisation, that might have to be either a fairly coarse breakdown or a very fine breakdown. And then look at each of those elements in terms of whether it's handling strategic goods, technology, software or not. And then look at the quantity, the amount of goods or technology or software that's controlled that each of those is handling, and then perhaps produce some sort of heat map so you can identify the areas of higher risk. And then I would start tackling those areas of high risk. That's the way I would tackle it. I have to say that if you had a violation during the course of that activity, it wouldn't mean that that activity wouldn't prevent you from having a violation if one was going to happen. But if a regulator was concerned about your company's commitment to compliance and you got this sort of process underway, they could see that you were actually trying to improve your compliance and taking it seriously and had a level of commitment. So that's the way I would start that issue.
Okay, thank you. And another question we had in advance of the webinar was one from Chris, who asks if the qualifications involved would have benefits for a compliance function within a financial institution as opposed to an exporter.
Right, I'll have a go at that one as well. Yes, my experience and knowledge of financial institutions is lower than obviously the technical areas that I was involved in, but I am aware that financial institutions have many strong interests in export control compliance, and they're interested in the export control compliance of the people for whom with whom they're dealing, for whom they're handling money or lending money. So it is important for financial institutions to understand this issue, and also to be sure that they're not, to be sure that they are compliant with regulations, particularly sanctions regulations, etc. So yes, this is an interesting one because I think it is an area that the export control profession can help with. I have to say at the moment it's early days for that side of things. We have been approached by a financial professional association type organisation to open a dialogue. We haven't actually had a conversation with them yet, but they've asked us to have a conversation. That's where we're up to. So I think the answer is yes, and we'll be developing that over the next few weeks and months.
Thank you. We're getting a few questions in from people who are just asking about kind of how much experience would you need to become a member, or things like, is it a UK only profession? My understanding at the moment is it's starting predominantly UK, but in terms of how much experience is needed to qualify as a member, obviously it's early days in the establishment, so that might be one. I mean, Roger, do you know kind of how many years is needed? My understanding is 3 years.
Yeah, I would say that if you've got 3 years experience, then that would be a good basis on which to apply for associate membership. If you've got 10 years experience, then full membership would be available to you. But I want to stress that each application is evaluated on its own merits. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all of those years have to be directly involved in export control. If you've got experience in exporting, and during that time you were complying with export control, then that will certainly be taken into consideration. As I say, it's difficult to draw general rules, but probably the best thing to do would be to submit your CV, to submit your with as much in there as possible about your export control experience. That will be evaluated by the Institute of Export evaluators with many years experience of doing this, and then it will be discussed amongst some members of the export control profession board. So we're making sure that everything is fair and square for everybody.
Can I come in on that one, if that's okay? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because the courses that we run in export control, the export control joint unit courses, some of the people that come on the courses have been thrown into this world in, sort of like in at the deep end and don't know much about it at all. But I think that thing about belonging to a company that has got exporting, and you've got exporting background yourself, is really important. But suffice to recognise that sometimes you are going to be absolute beginners in this world, aren't you?
Thank you.
Yes, and it's worth noting as well that people can join the IUE as an affiliate at any time as well. So there's that option too. We've had a question in from Linda who's just asked for clarification. So she's asked, obviously there are export and import controls. Is she right in assuming that this profession is in relation predominantly to export controls?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yes, it is totally concerned with export controls. The work that we've been doing as the board has all been for companies that are engaged with exporting. But that, I guess, that doesn't mean it can't be considered in the future. But I'm not aware that it's going to be considered by this board. It depends what sort of help your caller actually wants with importing, because we can refer them to organisations that can help with import controls, and they sit within the Department for International Trade as well. So if we get further details, we can probably help them.
Certainly, some members of the Export Control Profession Board have got experience of import regulations as well. And I would say that if this turned out to be something that was important, then we could expand on our competence in that area.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose what you need to look at as well is the issue that in manufacturing, you're not just exporting to a country, you're also importing components and parts, aren't you, to put into the finished product. So it is something there that needs to be looked at. I think it's probably one that the board needs to have a look at.
Okay. We're getting quite a few questions about specific user cases regarding membership and experience, which I think we will take offline afterwards, if that's okay with everyone. One question we have had is regarding the Exports Control Symposium that was mentioned. I think we're just asking for a bit more detail about what's going to be happening there and how the launch is going to take place there. Are you able to speak to that, Roger?
Yeah, I can give you a bit of background on it. It's on the 30th of May. It's going to be held at the Park Plaza in Westminster. We've got allocation for a maximum of 250 people to come to the event. And it's going to take the same form as it has done over the last few years. So we're going to have a half day up to lunch of open plan plenary, where we'll be talking through issues about global affairs. We'll be having a catch up on what's happening with EU exit. We've got quite a lot to talk about in there about preparations. We'll have people talking about from the industry about some of the issues that industry are facing, in particular some of the challenges that they'll be facing. So that'll be sort of like the morning session, where we'll also be launching formally the profession, and I believe we'll be joined by members of the Institute, including Leslie Batchelor on that, which should be very welcome. She'll be very welcome to join us on that. And then in the afternoon, what we'll have is a series of workshops, and the invitation is available on the Export Control Joint Unit website. So if you wanted to sign up for it, you'll get to see what type of workshops we've got that will take place in the afternoon. Because we're running the plenary right up until lunchtime, we'll only have 2 workshops in the afternoon this time. But please do take time to have a look at it.
And I and a number of the Export Control Profession Board will be there. Well, both all the day, but particularly in the afternoon, we'll be available there to answer any questions that you've got.
That's absolutely right. And Roger, I think you're going to also have a stand in our exhibition area, is that right?
Right, yeah, we've got a stand in the exhibition area. That's probably the best place to try and come and meet us.
Great, thank you. We've also had a few questions in from existing IUE members asking will they qualify for the control, or will they be able to transfer their membership over to the new profession. My understanding is that they will still have to qualify, of course, for the control profession, i.e. show their experience and then be approved by the board, but then they will be able to renew as a MIE-XCP. That's the correct understanding, is that right, Roger? And,
yeah, that's my understanding of the situation as well. We talked about this with Leslie yesterday, and that sounded like a pretty straightforward thing to do. But you have to go through the application process just to make sure it's fair for everybody.
Great. Well, we've had a few questions in about whether we'll be showing the slides as well. We'll definitely be showing the recording. Claire and Roger, are you happy for us to share the slides as well upon request?
Absolutely. Yes. The more people that can see these slides, the better, as far as we're concerned. So please do.
Fantastic. Yes. So if you would like a copy of the slides, please just email us at admin@opentextport.com. We will be sharing the recording as well, and we'll share some more information about the profession in that follow-up messaging. And on that note, I think it's probably time for us to wrap up. So thank you once again to Roger and Claire for answering those questions and for telling us so much about the new profession. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. Great. So you can find out more about joining the new profession on our website, and we'll be delighted to tell you more about that in due course as well. As well as the export controls profession, the Institute continues to do a lot of work in professionalising skills and knowledge around international customs, and our customs pathway is an ideal way for you to become a recognised customs expert as well. This is a combination of some of our one-day training courses that can be taken towards the attainment of a Customs Practitioner Award, grant funding from the government towards training provided by the Institute that enables you to complete customs declarations and other important trade processes has also been extended to May 31st. So do hurry up and apply for that funding if you're looking to prepare properly for Brexit. And also a lot of those skills are already useful for exporting beyond the EU as well. So do have a look at that. The Institute is also taking its World Trade Summit programme to Belfast and Bristol this summer. For more information about all of this activity, please go to export.org.uk. Next slide, please. In terms of webinars, we're going beyond the EU with a series of market introductions looking at India, Latin America, the USA, and Africa this summer. The first of these is India next Friday, the 10th. And you can find details about all of our webinars at open2export.com/webinars. As always, please do take our exit survey to let us know what you thought of today's webinar and to give us any suggestions or improvements for future topics. But for now, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.